It's a situation I think you kind of capture in your opening chapter, because you could have chosen several personalities to open the book with, but I was pleased, and this is a very strange thing to say because this person is so odious. You chose to open with Dr. Paul Gosar, Republican representative from Arizona. I've been writing about him, we've been talking about him, and it still amazes me that the media just does not care about him. I mean, just a quick reference for those who are listening, that Paul Gosar just recently on camera was caught praising someone who said, we shot at immigrants, and he encouraged them. This is the same man who promoted memes of violence against AOC, his fellow colleague. This is the same man who, along with Marjorie Taylor Greene, just a few months ago, openly spoke at white nationalist and anti-Semite Nick Fuentes' conference, and he doubled down on it, and he's still in good standing. And the decision to open the book with a profile of him, why him, Robert?
Yeah, I couldn't resist. I mean, thanks, Waj. You can see Gosar as a far-right version of Jimmy Stewart, right? This guy who's like the sort of bland figure.
Poor Jimmy Stewart, man. What did Jimmy Stewart do to deserve that?
I know. Yeah, exactly. His heirs are going to be phoning me, I'm sure. But this guy who's like an utterly unremarkable figure, who nonetheless the sort of pick your metaphors. We'll go with Mrs. O'Leary's cow. Let's say kicked over the pail by when November 3rd 2020 didn't turn out as planned, and Trump yelled that the election was stolen. Paul Gosar, this obscure right-wing congressman from Arizona, proceeded to host the first Stop the Steal rally in Phoenix, Arizona, and others subsequent to it, which led then to nationwide Stop the Steal rallies. Then Gosar became the first congressman in American history to team with a U.S. senator to challenge the electoral results, to object to the certification of the state of Arizona. And
that was Ted Cruz, right?
Right, that was Ted Cruz. And so he gets us into the story that way. But he became interesting to me along the way for a couple of other reasons. I mean, one of them is, as you just referenced, was this is a guy who has done such odious things. It has associated with and embraced such absurd and offensive ideologies that you would think he would be consigned, to the Star Wars bar of Republican politics with Steve King of Iowa and the like. Instead, he became an object lesson in how the Republican Party has lost its ability and its will to punish people like him. Why? Because the MAGA base embraces a guy like Gosar. So that's one other reason. But the final reason why I was interested in Gosar was that Gosar actually, for all of his negative aspects, has tried to be from time to time a serious legislator and to pass bipartisan legislation, which led to me to the kind of thought experiment of, can you be both? Can you be a crazy extremist, election-denying, conspiratorial right-winger like Gosar and try to get major bipartisan legislation done? The question probably answers itself, but in the reporting of it, I talk in the book about how there were these major works projects that ordinarily Republicans and some Democrats would have signed on to. But for the Democrats, it was like, am I really going to be a co-sponsor with a guy who refuses to call Biden a legitimately elected president, literally will not call him President Biden, and instead just calls him Mr. Biden? So he presents an opportunity to show the limitations of governance, let's say, for a guy of his ideology.
One of the other people, as Waj was doing his opening, that has started out as a fringe character, Marjorie Taylor Greene, fringe character. The media treated her in the same way that they initially treated Donald Trump's first run for president, as a joke, right? Here comes this woman who chased down a victim of gun violence, right, throughout Washington, D.C., who has used anti-Semitic claims of lasers being controlled by Jewish people in outer space, has said that Democrats at rallies and recently are trying to kill us, right, to incite even more violence than that has already happened. And the media treated her and continues to treat her as a fringe part of the Republican Party. Well, now she has become one of the foremost leaders, the right hand to Kevin McCarthy, so much so that as he was doing his preliminary vote on whether or not he's going to be able to hold the gavel again, he needed Marjorie Taylor Greene in his corner. God knows what committee she's going to end up running. But my question for you, Robert, is about the media. And what is it that mainstream media got wrong and continues to get wrong about creating this distance between the fringe far right and who the Republican Party is? Language like hijacked, hostage, will the real Republicans stand up, right? As if we're looking around for Slim Shady. And I'm just like wondering, is it we created this distance? And what do you think the responsibility is at this moment when someone like a Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to be leading a committee?
Yeah. I mean, Danielle, the bumper sticker answer to your question is they didn't take her seriously. And they believed that her views were so wackadoodle that therefore in any reasonable universe would mean that she also would be consigned with Gosar to the Star Wars bar. But the reality was that she represented a thought that was not just limited to this rural northwestern Georgia congressional district, but in fact was held by tens of millions of Americans who believe lots of things, not just that the election was stolen, not just that January the 6th was an Antifa or FBI setup, not just that COVID vaccines kill, but all these other, lies relating to the Great Replacement theory, et cetera. I mean, there's a real constituency for that. And she was of them, and she seemed like just someone who was yearning for attention, and that was the sum total of who she was. And very lengthy profiles of Greene were written to that effect, and they utterly missed the point of her. Yes, she loves attention, but and yes, there is an attention economy that in which she thrives. But she's also deadly serious about pursuing policy aims, and a very, very effective messenger to those people who view her as the proximate warrior to the MAGA movement and have had a yearning for a MAGA brawler ever since Trump left Washington. And he's still kind of their God figure. But she is the stand-in for Trump. People just did not take that seriously in the way that, as you said, they didn't take Trump seriously. And now I think some of that is a kind of groupthink also. Some of it is that the media believed that reasonable Republicans got this, and reasonable Republicans also thought they got this. But my book, and this is just certainly not anything that I anticipated I'd be writing about, but it actually ends up tracing two opposing trajectories of two female Republicans. The downward trajectory of the single most famous female Republican in America, Liz Cheney, and the upward trajectory of this completely obscure, seemingly absolutely nuts Georgia freshman who now, as you say quite accurately, Danielle, is one of the most powerful Republicans in Washington. That is an unfathomable dueling arc, and says a lot about the state of play of the Republican politics in the Trump era.
Well, let's talk about Liz Cheney, right? Because you devote a section of your book to Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney, for those of you who are young heads, is a Cheney. She's the daughter of Dick Cheney, who we used to call Darth Vader due to his evil machinations during the new conservative rule and the disastrous war on terror. But she is GOP royalty, ladies and gentlemen. She used to be the number 3 ranking Republican. She voted with Donald Trump 93% of the time. She had political ambitions. Maybe she'd run for president, maybe vice president. And right now, she's person non grata, absolutely hated by the Republican Party. In fact, now she's straight up vouching for Hobbs instead of Lake, and maybe her support gave Katie Hobbs enough votes to win in Arizona, right? This all happened within 2 years because Liz Cheney said, a violent insurrection that might kill me and my colleagues is a step too far. I think we should defend democracy. And for that and that alone, the Republican Party turned on her. And so it's kind of a remarkable downfall, Robert, right? Like, because for those of us who have been through this, who are the old heads, we're like Liz Cheney sitting next to Democrats during the January 6th hearings. Like, what? And being seen as a conspiratorial left-wing puppet of George Soros by the right wing. Like, this is a Star Wars, like hopefully a deleted scene from Star Wars that you never think would actually see the light of day. What does that tell us about the future of the Republican Party as we stand right here in 2022, right? Because there was an audit of the Republican Party after McCain and Romney lost. They knew that they had to court Latinos and women and people of color. And instead they said, no, we're going to double down. We're going to go Sarah Palin, Tea Party, hate monger, conspiracy theories, Donald Trump. Now there's a 2020 insurrection. Nope, still with Trump. 2022 should have been a red wave. The only question we should have asked is, how big will this red wave be? And instead, it's this, I mean, it defies history because they were so extreme. And even now, they're like, no, we're going to pivot to DeSantis or maybe Trump. So with that, and specifically what happened to Cheney in the last year alone, what does this say about the future trajectory of any Republican who decides that they want to be patriots and put country first before GOP, Trump, or DeSantis?
Yeah, sure. That Waj, a couple of things. One is that the messenger for the Republican Party that Danielle and I were just talking about, Marjorie Taylor Greene, that messenger used to be Liz Cheney. I mean, even before she held office, I remember watching her on the Sunday TV shows. And she was beyond formidable. You know, it was evident that this was a person who, leaving aside whatever you think of her worldview, was just extremely poised and effective. And the understanding was that the sky was the limit for her, that really she could be Speaker of the House. She could be Senator if she wanted. She could be Vice President. She could perhaps even be President. Kevin McCarthy once was asked, and McCarthy recognized that she was going to be a competitor in the House hierarchy. He was asked at a public event what he thought of some of the other stars in the Republican Party, and he volunteered the name Liz Cheney, but then said, I think she'd be a great Secretary of Defense, which is his way of like moving her out of his constellation. But, you know, now what has happened is that, you know, for Democrats and for K Street Republicans, Cheney has emerged as a, you know, especially for Democrats, a very unlikely hero. But for a lot of, for most Republican office holders, she's actually a cautionary tale. You know, their view is that's what happens when you stand up. You know, that's what happens when you defy Trump, when you defy Trumpism, you get the Liz Cheney treatment. You know, we don't see that she's adored by the left. We're not sure what the end game is of that. All we know is she got primaried. She ain't in office anymore, and there is no constituency for her in the Republican Party should she want to run for president in 2024. Flash forward to, you know, the midterms now, and yeah, it's possible, as you say, that she played some kind of a validating role for Katie Hobbs, and certainly they had, you know, she had her little quip, her thank you or you're welcome, Carrie Lake, but you know, we're still left with a party that, I mean, even the kinder, gentler version of Donald Trump that some people are shaping Ron DeSantis out to be is still pugilistic.
Not us, Robert.
Yeah, right.
Not here.
I didn't think as much. But I also think that this is, you know, chapter 38 or so of wishful thinking that Donald Trump has finally, you know, that the curtains are finally closing down on Donald Trump. I mean, we have seen this so many times before. The reality is that Trump leaves the stage when the MAGA base leaves him. And thus far, the evidence is far from convincing to me that has happened. He still, you know, it may well be that the base will feel the same way that a lot of Republican political professionals feel. We're tired of losing. We'd like to win. The truth is, my hypothesis has been that the MAGA base, in a sense, knows that they are already losing their country. What they want is a fighter. The outcome to them is not nearly as important as the performance, and as the appearance of being on their side and of sharing the same enemy and calling out and kicking sand in the eyes of those enemies. The mainstream media, the liberal Democrats, etc. But winning elections to them isn't nearly as important because the Republicans who've taken power have done very little on their behalf. So while you can understand why Republicans would want to move on from Trump, since after all, every time the general electorate has had an opportunity to say what they feel about Donald Trump, they have rejected him every single time, going back to 2016. The fact is that the base of the Republican Party has always loved him, and we'll see if that changes. The evidence, again, is not yet in, but I need to be convinced.